and we can get rich and we can keep people happy while we do it. I mean, that was a firm line of thinking amongst some of these batchers. And but at the end of the day, the thing that largely puts them out of business is the corporate version of the drug trafficking industry, which again, much like the American food industry, is controlled by a very small number of entities. And so, the super lab, it's like Cisco, I mean, when you have access to this sort of distribution power, then you can put people out of business at will. But the thing that makes meth particularly bad is that the drug trafficking organizations don't just control distribution and retail, they control manufacture. It's difficult to think of any illicit business on earth that controls the entire value chain that way. Walmart doesn't do it. They don't manufacture anything. They distribute it and they sell it at retail. But the only other business actually that does control the entire value chain is the American food industry. And so to me, again, back to this notion of sort of tectonic plates and stuff, once the consolidation of the American food industry so completely depredated and depleted the economics or the economy of a place like Oelwein, and meth moved into the vacuum, it's interesting that the people who started manufacturing meth, in fact, just opened the door to the Cargills of the drug trafficking world, who were then able to come in and take a good business. So, and that's when things get really, you can do something about a guy who makes it in his bathtub. You can't do anything about the big drug traffickers.
I think we had a question up here. Yeah.
Actually, I think this is a twofold question, but I just wanted to say I read your book and I loved it, and I think thus far it's my favorite of the year.
Thank you.
She's on the Strand's retainer.
So I think it's been described as an epidemic, and so I'm kind of wondering, like the crack epidemic, what do we mean by epidemic? And is this something, I think you referred to it in the past tense, as if it's over. So I'm wondering if that's really true, and if it isn't, what would create the stoppage of an epidemic like this? Just like with the crack epidemic, we say it's over. Well, why? So two things. What is it, and will it end?
I talked to a number of drug epidemiologists when I was doing this, and I think I talked to 4 of them, and I think 3 were honest and one wasn't honest. And the 3 who were honest, when I said, what is a drug epidemic, said, I don't know. Because it is impossible to mathematically quantify. Does a drug epidemic mean that 7% of a given population does meth? How often do they do it? When's it's very difficult. It's impossible to come up with an answer to the basic kind of mathematical questions, And so, I think what you're left with is the notion that we can't quantify it, but we know something bad's going on, and your only recourse, I think, as an interested party, whether you're a journalist or whether you're the mayor of the town or the prosecutor or whatever, is to rely on anecdotal evidence. And anecdotally, which begins the second part of the answer to your second question, which is that no, this is not something that has gone away. In fact, the recent legislation, which has been yet another failure in a long series of failures, has really only made it worse. So what do I mean if it's worse, if I can't put percentages on it? The number of cases that people try for, manufacture, distribution, any number of crimes that are meth related have gone up again in this particular locale and in many. And so it's very much I think not over. In fact, it's just gotten easier for people to produce it themselves, actually. And, you know, how do you know that? By going and talking to people, looking at court records, and going to the emergency room and talking. You know, I mean, it's a that, you know, if it looks like a drug, I mean, epidemic is kind of a silly word, but if it looks like one, that smells like one, that sounds like one, probably is one, you know.
So when I read your book, I thought you laid out the economics of it very clearly. It was pretty inevitable what was going to happen given the takeovers and the need for the population to keep trying something. So I guess my question was, is there anything that the town could have done? The town, not the larger system of takeovers and government and, you know, industrialization. Is there anything the town could have done to stop this, given that they were pawns in the game? And also, a second part of that question is there, have people approached you? Because you seem to lay it out very clearly, and it's pretty obvious from reading the book. Have people approached you and said, oh, you have the information, why don't we do X?
You know, preemptively, I don't know that the town could have done anything. Probably doesn't matter because it's history, right? You know, and what's happened has happened. I think that what the town was able and is able to do, they have done, which is to approach this by saying this is primarily an economic question. An economic question becomes a cultural one and a social one, and one of a psychic question. You know, I mean, there's this kind of, you know, enduring sense of low morale and stuff and so what we're going to do is we're going to tackle the economy, and that's what they've done. It's actually, I mean, never mind the fact that there's this, you know, I don't know what we call it anymore. Is it a recession or a depression or whatever it is? You know, I mean, never mind that whole thing. Even in the best of times, what they have done to buck the trend of the last 3 decades by adding a lot of jobs, high-paying jobs, and adding a lot of several new sources for education in the area is astounding. And so I think they've done everything that they can, and they've done it to wonderful effect. What has happened is that they've essentially there's been a little bit of a role reversal. The town 15 miles from them that used to be sort of the polished of the two, you know, the one, you know, Oelwein was sort of had a smudge on its face, and Independence had, you know, was kind of sort of, you know, duded up or whatever. They have not anticipated what was going to happen, and now Oelwein's meth problem has essentially moved down the road to Independence. And so, you know, the point being that as remarkable and as heroic as it is, I think what Oelwein has been able to do just in the last 24 months, there's still, it's a question of a system, of a deck that's stacked against them. So, like, how long can you ask these people to continually sort of perform the same Sisyphean task? You know, I mean, it's
going to the next town forever. There is no reason why that town is different than any other.
Yeah, and I think that eventually, you know, I mean, if Oelwein doesn't somehow continue to grow financially, then it's just going to come right back. And I mean, and this is the problem in many ways of the stagnant economy of the region. I mean, how can you, I mean, the whole notion of like constant growth in a place that is depopulating and that industries, I mean, how do you manage that? I don't know. I mean, that's sort of what my next book is about. It's